So please welcome Reem Ibrahim.
Hi, so if you've been spending any time over the past few days with me, you know that I've really lost my voice, so I'm really sorry if I start coughing randomly, or if I don't get through the whole hour. But I have water, I have taken sufficient drugs, I think I'll be okay. So love as the first step to entrepreneurship. The first thing I want to ask all of you is, have you ever been in love? Have you ever felt love? Give me a hands up, who here has ever felt love before? Oh, it's a wonderful feeling, isn't it? You are absolutely driven mad. Well, it depends on the kind of love that you feel. When you're loving something and you are absolutely crazy. You might stay up until 4 or 5 in the morning texting that person that you love. You do things that drive you absolutely mad. You feel crazy when you love someone. Yeah, you might. Oh yeah, go on. Oh, who has not experienced love? So there are people that haven't experienced love, there are people that have experienced love. Now, when you love somebody, or you love something, or you love an object, you tend to be driven mad. You act differently, you act in different ways. You might stay up until 4 or 5 in the morning texting that person, saying, oh, I miss you so much. And even if you have an exam the next day, or you have a class the next day at 9 a.m., you're still going to stay up and talk to that person because you're driven by this crazy drive inside of you. So you might stay up late. It drives us to do those things that we wouldn't necessarily consider to be normal behaviour. Can we all agree that that's something that happens when you love someone? Now, I would say that historically this kind of love, this crazy love, has been characterised very well throughout literature. I am British, in case you can't tell by my accent and by the introduction. So of course I have to include some Shakespeare in this presentation. This is, if anybody's ever seen the play or read the play Twelfth Night by Shakespeare, if music be the food of love, play on, is the most common, well-known, famous phrase from this play. And this absolutely crazy, love-driven leader, this king, this Duke Orsino, he is absolutely mad and driven by love. And so I mean, you could read the quote, give me excess of it, that surfeiting the appetite may sicken and so die. It sounds very fitting with my British accent, I think. But it's Shakespeare, this characterization of love that has been driven so deeply. And this love drives us to behave in particular ways that we wouldn't necessarily behave in normal ways otherwise. Now, as an entrepreneur, somebody who runs a business, somebody who has an idea, you have that same love, that same drive, that same hope that something is out there, something could be. You stay up late till 4 or 5 in the morning thinking about this idea that you absolutely love, and you are still thinking about it. And you cannot stop thinking about it. You're driven mad. You are mad with love because of this particular thing. Now, to become an entrepreneur, you have to be absolutely barking mad. Because, this is again a very British term, you have to be mad because you have to love what you do. Now, entrepreneurship is not just about making money. It's not just about the sort of profit motive. If it was, nobody would be an entrepreneur because the majority of businesses do fail. This is data from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics. The BLS shows that approximately 20% of new businesses fail during the first 2 years, 45% during the first 5 years, 65% during the first 10 years, and only 25% of new businesses actually make it to the 15 years mark or more. It's the love of an idea. It's something that doesn't yet exist, something that does not exist yet in this world that you want to create as an entrepreneur. You want to add this particular product or service or idea into the world, into the market space for other people to enjoy. And that is what that love is that idea that drives entrepreneurship. Again, this entrepreneur cannot stop thinking about this thing, and that's why they're driven by love. Now, this entrepreneur wants to participate in the greater advancement of this idea. All of a sudden, they are consumed entirely by this idea. It's like when you suddenly fall in love with somebody and it hits you so hard, you cannot stop thinking about that individual. Entrepreneurship is essentially driven by this same fire, this same desire, this same love for something that you had absolutely no preconception of before. But as soon as this idea comes to mind, you are driven by this love. Now, of course, in a free market system, this is something that is valuable to other people as well as yourself. You cannot create something in a free market system and create it purely for yourself and expect to become an entrepreneur. That's not entrepreneurship, that's making stuff for yourself. Entrepreneurship requires you to love something and show the world and allow other people to also love it as well. It's somebody that is willing to make sacrifices. Now, entrepreneurs sacrifice a huge amount of things. They sacrifice their time, their money, their energy, their sleep. They will be, staying up again until 4, 5, 6 in the morning, fulfilling those orders or making those things or creating those ideas or meeting with people in order to make this thing happen, because they cannot, for the love of God, cannot stop thinking about this one thing that they want to create. And they are willing to make those sacrifices to create that new thing that they love. Ayn Rand said that to love is to value. Entrepreneurs see this value in something that they want to create, something they want to add to the world, something they want to introduce to the world, and they allow them to love that thing. Now, here are 3 examples of entrepreneurs that I think encompass this philosophy of love, this love for something in its entirety. And water break because I'm going to die. Okay. My voice sounds very rusty. So this is the first guy, John DeJoria. He is an entirely self-made individual. He is most well known as the founder of Paul Mitchell. Us girls that do our hair, we know with Paul Mitchell, a line of hair products. Guys, I'm sure there are many guys here that love a Paul Mitchell hair mousse. But his early life was not characterized by these same riches. He started his career as a truck driver, a janitor. He even sold Christmas cards door to door. He was fired from his first job in hair care whilst working for Rocket Laboratories. Then in 1980, he formed John Paul Mitchell Systems with hairdresser Paul Mitchell with a loan of just $700. He's now worth $3.1 billion. Now, you don't get there by creating something and not caring about it. You don't stay up time and time again. You don't give up everything that you have in this world without caring for something, without truly loving your product, without truly loving the thing that you are doing. So he once said that the biggest hurdle is rejection. Any business that you start, you've got to be ready for it. The difference between successful people and unsuccessful people is the successful people do all of the things the unsuccessful people don't want to do. When 10 doors are slammed in your face, go to door number 11 enthusiastically with a smile on your face. And it sounds like very wise words, I think, from any entrepreneur. Thirdly, here we have Howard Schultz. He's a Starbucks founder. I love a good Starbucks. I love a good iced caramel latte. That's my fave. With extra cream on top as well. I shouldn't have that now, though, with my sore throat. That would probably make it worse. But Howard Schultz may be synonymous with, I think, the most encompassing entrepreneurial success. Life, obviously, of course, wasn't so easy. And this story can be seen time and time again with entrepreneurs. His family didn't have much money when they grew up at a housing estate. He paid for college with part-time jobs. He was the first person in his family to go to college. That's the dying part. It was whilst working for a coffee company that he actually decided he wanted to come in contact with the Starbucks brand. He joined the company as marketing director, and he left Starbucks and decided to open his own coffee house. And he raised $500,000 that he needed to open up his first store and start his business. 2 years later, the original Starbucks management decided to sell, and then he was able to create all of these things. Schultz is now worth in excess of $2.9 billion, so not bad for the empire that he once dreamed of. His experiences led to him to develop, I think, is quite a Randian philosophical approach to life. He says, I believe in a series of near misses. A lot of what we ascribe to is luck, not luck at all. It's seizing the day and accepting responsibility for your future. It's seeing what other people don't see and pursuing that vision. It's about seizing those opportunities and taking responsibility for your own future. Now, that's a Randian if I've ever seen one. Then in the middle, we've got the lovely Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, who I think is probably two of the most famous entrepreneurs to ever exist. The story of Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak starting Apple computers in their garage in Los Angeles, California, is particularly well known. The pair had pulled out from their respective college courses and began developing consumer devices in Jobs' parents' garage in California. But then before this, Steve worked an assortment of low-paid jobs, including one when he was 13 for Hewlett-Packard. After developing a couple of different models, he then, the pair together created Apple. Now, of course, we know that they're worth upwards of sort of $10 billion. But when Steve died in 2011, he was said to be worth about $10.2 billion. Now, as for their legacy, we see this everywhere. I've got my Apple Mac there, my iPhone is somewhere there. I know many of us will have our iPhones there as well. That legacy, that love for this product, that drive, this innovation, has been created by these individuals and these entrepreneurs, and this is crucial for their understanding of the world, and it's crucial for the advancement of the world. What I will say, though, is that in these free market systems, we've got to remember that in a free market capitalist system, now I don't tend to really use the word capitalism. I think it's an unhelpful term because, as we know, Marx coined the term capitalism. I don't think it's necessarily the best description for what I think of free market. I prefer the word free market or a market economy. As an entrepreneur in a market economy, when you have this idea and you have this love and you have this driven, you are rewarded for it. You are then rewarded for any of this creation that you do. So in a market economy, and this is essentially what I'm trying to ram down your throats here, and I'm joking, argue, convince you of this idea, that in a market economy, capitalist system, whatever you want to call it, you are rewarded for creating something that other people also want. So when you love something and you're driven by this love and you can't stop thinking about it, you are rewarded for loving something and for working so hard towards it and for contributing to the advancement of society. You are rewarded for those things. It is in our self-interest, as we know, to cooperate with one another. It's very sort of Adam Smith, sort of Smithian idea behind free trade and behind cooperation. It's in our own individual self-interest to cooperate and trade with one another. Now, when we're creating something, in order for an entrepreneur to be successful, they have to also provide that something that other people also want. And that love is the driving force behind entrepreneurship. Most new businesses, of course, as we know, fail, and that is why that this free market economic system, in a free market where we have this competition and we have the voluntary exchange of goods and services, nobody, no government, no institution can force you to put your money anywhere. I am very happy to voluntarily give my money to Starbucks because I love that iced caramel latte and it makes me very happy on my way to work in the morning. And that's completely voluntary. Nobody can force me to do that. It is completely up to me to do that as a consumer. And that is the beauty of a free market system. Now, I feel like I am sort of preaching to the choir here. All of you very intelligent people know that that's the case. Unfortunately, there are also a lot of people in the world that don't think this way. So a free market economy at its core is the voluntary exchange of goods and services. It's sort of firms competing. It is in our self-interest to then cooperate. And I think what's interesting about this as a whole is sort of looking at, well, this is Israel Kirzner's quote. I don't know if any of you have heard of Kirzner, I'm sure many of you have. But he sort of talks about human action and human action being part of discovery. Now, when you're discovering these new things and you're creating these new things, I'm not going to read out the whole quote. Oh, actually, maybe I will read out the whole quote. So human action is discovery, an act of discovery in which resources are deployed to achieve an objective represents as the realization that, before the discovery, the relevant resources had been undervalued. The full potential of these resources had had not been up to now understood. Thus, the act of discovery, and thus indeed every human action, represents the discovery of hitherto unsuspected value in hitherto undervalued resources. So it's about finding that value, and that's what Rand talks about in Objectivist Ethics. It's about this idea that love is when you find value in something, and when you value something, you're valuing that in your life, and that is love. Those two words, I think, are almost synonymous with one another. I don't know if any of you guys have read or heard of Leonard Read's I Pencil. So Leonard Read, he sort of, I think it's popularized by Milton Friedman, but he sort of comes up with this idea that I'm holding this pencil and no individual, the dying Leonard Read. So no individual in this entire universe, in this entire world, can create this pencil. So not one individual can create this pencil, this imaginary pencil. Let's pretend I'm holding a pencil. And no individual can create this pencil themselves. It is a result of free trade and cooperation and all of these wonderful individuals in the world that have these free market incentives in order to cooperate with one another and create this fantastic pencil. You've got the wood that could be from the trees in Brazil, from the Amazon rainforest. You've got the lead that could have been discovered elsewhere in Asia. You could have found the paint and the colour could be from the mica powders in Africa. All of these wonderful products and these discoveries that have occurred, the thing that incentivizes these people that probably speak different languages, different cultures, different religions, if they probably met, they could probably even hate each other, but what brings them together is this cooperation and this free trade, and it's the market, it's these market mechanisms that brings them together in order for them to create that pencil. So Ayn Rand herself also spoke about this sort of idea behind entrepreneurship and this idea that love drives entrepreneurship itself. This is the wonderful Howard work from the Fountainhead, and it sort of talks about the basic need of the creator is independence. So think about the creator as this loving entrepreneur, this entrepreneur that has these creative ideas, that wants to give these ideas to the rest of the world in order for them to advance society and advance the world themselves. So the basic need of the creator is independence. The reasoning mind cannot work under any form of compulsion. It cannot be curbed, sacrificed, or subordinated to any consideration whatsoever. It demands total independence in function and in motive. In a market economy, in a market system, in a free market capitalist system, creators, entrepreneurs, they are completely free to pursue these ideas, to pursue the pursuit of these ideas in order for them to be advanced into the world, and in order for them to compete on the marketplace with other ideas and other entrepreneurs and other creatives that have also had these ideas as well. In this sort of, I think what Howard sort of talks about himself as a character, he has these ideas, and when he's working as a architect, his unwillingness to think the way of company men is what makes him the quintessential entrepreneur. In one of the most poignant scenes, I think, in The Fountainhead, when Howard Hawks reflects with compassion and empathy on the plight of his friend, the shunned modern sculptor Stephen Mallory, who suffers because he can't do the work he wants to. Now, in a market economy, as an entrepreneur, you're free to do those things and free to pursue your own happiness yourself as well. Not being allowed to get this thing inside of me out into the world, it causes this ache, this yearning. Sound familiar? It's love. When you've got this love and this yearning for something that you have to put out there, and you're driven to take these things and take them out into the world. And this is exactly why the free market economy is far superior to any other economic system ever to exist. Now, I would also like to point out the fact that capitalism isn't just moral because it causes better outcomes. Although I think that is an argument that adds to our argument that capitalism, the free market, has caused all of these wonderful things to be advanced, and all of these great entrepreneurs that have been able to create these things and advance them and then compete, and then obviously we see more efficiency and we see more of these products and we see trade across the world. Of course those things are good, and of course those outcomes are good, but that's a consequentialist argument. And I actually think that that maybe plays into the hands of the sort of altruistic arguments themselves. Capitalism is moral because it is encompassed by this voluntary exchange of goods and services. We exchange value for value. You're not forced to give your money anywhere you don't want to. I want to give my money to Starbucks to get my salted caramel iced latte. I can do that completely voluntarily. I can vote with my dollar. If I don't like this company because they don't align with my values, maybe they argue for more government, or they are rent-seeking, or they're lobbying government in order for them to get special privileges, I can choose to stop giving my money to that company or to that business. If I go to a company or a business or a bakery down the street and the business owner is terribly rude, or they said they don't like Shakespeare and I was very upset about it, I can choose myself not to give my money to that Shakespeare-hating baker. Terrible. Don't hate Shakespeare. No one is forced or coerced to do anything that they want, that they don't want to do. Now, unfortunately, so this is just the argument. Voluntary exchange is a transaction where goods or services are traded freely. There is no coercive or restrictive forces involved in the transaction. Both parties want to make the exchange and both parties will benefit from the trade. Voluntary exchange is the basis of a free market economy. Woo, we love it. It's great. Now, I know all of you wonderful, intelligent people already know these things. However, there are some very bad people in the world that don't agree with us, and they are the socialists, the communists. The Oxford English Dictionary defines socialism as a political and economic theory of social organisation that advances that the means of production, distribution and exchange should be owned or regulated by the community as a whole. Now, what does community really mean when they say community? If we're talking about full socialism, the regulated here really doesn't matter. It's complete regulation and control, which is effectively the same thing as complete ownership. In a fully socialist society, the capitalists, those who own the means of production, like factories and grocery stores, those are entirely abolished. That baker can't tell the Shakespeare haters that they can also have their bakeries, their baked goods from a Shakespeare hater. It's completely gone. The government, an institution, normally a coercive authoritarian state, gets to choose those things for you. You, as an entrepreneur, don't get to pursue your love interest. It's completely crushed by the state and completely crushed by that coercive force. The coercion causes a complete loss of love. So we're thinking about things like taking the Soviet Union, for example, where we saw subsistence farming, where we saw a lot of the agricultural land after collectivization being used only just to the bare minimum that they need to provide, because there is no incentive to do anything more. There is no incentive to create anything more, because the government takes it from you. Should probably move the mic before I cough, so you don't have to hear me coughing. Okay. This entire loss of love. I'm half Moroccan, half Egyptian. So in Egypt, we saw the complete decimation of the economy. We saw we had one of the most thriving agricultural industries. We had Egyptian cotton. Might have even slept with Egyptian cotton last night. It's great. We love Egyptian cotton. However, we actually saw Egypt starting to import cotton as a result of how badly the government had intervened in these things. I actually had my great uncle's family business was nationalised. There we go. Now my voice is starting to go completely. My great uncle's family business was actually nationalised by by NASA. Okay, I'm going to get the spray out now as well. Capitalism, guys. This is the free market. So to take the Soviet Union, for example, I mean, it caused what, like 6 million deaths as a result of collectivization? It's just not great. And there are still people out there that argue for these things and argue that this is the way forward, right? That argue that capitalism, by some crazy standard, the free market is evil. That all capitalists want to do is to exploit the working class or to hurt individuals, which is completely not the case. And I know that all of you wonderful people already know that, but there are a lot of people that don't believe that. Under socialism, the entrepreneur is not rewarded for their love. It's very sad. The entrepreneur that stays up until 4 or 5 a.m. to create the wonderful thing that they love so much that they can't stop thinking about, that freedom, that drive is completely gone. It's completely taken away by the state. Under socialism, under a authoritarian state, under a totalitarian state, that love, that drive, that hope is completely crushed by the government, completely crushed by these coercive authoritarian states. And I think that is a complete tragedy. It's not only immoral in itself, it's not only causes bad outcomes, but it's just immoral in its entirety, right? We see these things happen throughout any authoritarian state, but I actually think that the historical arguments and the consequentialist arguments are not necessarily as helpful either. Capitalism is immoral not because we see people die, although that is a very bad thing to happen too. Capitalism isn't immoral because, capitalism isn't moral because we see all these fantastic things happen, or we see these technological advancements, or because we have iPhones. I love my iPhone, but that's not why capitalism is moral, just because it created these wonderful things. Capitalism is moral because it's voluntary, and it's because we're allowed, as entrepreneurs, we're allowed to have these creative ideas and pursue them completely freely. We're completely free under this free market system to pursue the ideas that we wish to pursue. But we are losing the intellectual battle amongst young people. Now, the majority of people here are, I would say, younger in itself, right? This is new polling data from LEGO, which is commissioned by the Fraser Institute. And we see that support for socialism as the ideal economic system is strongest amongst 18 to 34-year-olds. Who here is 18 to 34? Hands up, 18 to 34.
Oh, yes,
fine. You fit in the category. I'm young, yes. Yeah. Woo! Wow. I love capitalism because I'm young. I love this. There we go, categorization. So if you fit in that 1834 category and you are here, presumably because you believe in all of these wonderful principles and you presumably also believe in a free market economy, you are in the minority globally of these beliefs. I mean, the total agreement strongly agree that socialism is the ideal economic system amongst 18 to 34. The 18 to 34 age range is 43% in the US and 53% in the UK. So the majority of 18 to 34-year-olds in the UK, where I'm from, actually believe that socialism is great. Crazy. Okay, we look at this graph as well, and I think what's fascinating about this is that no matter what country we look at with this polling, if you're in that age bracket, that 18 to 34, the youngsters, if you're one of these youngsters, you are in the majority if you believe that socialism is great, and it doesn't matter what country we look at, that is the case. Anybody here who is online as well will know this, right? We see a lot of this stuff on TikTok, on Snapchat, on Instagram, wherever we are, we see these things occurring, and we see these arguments being made time and time again. Now, who here is on TikTok?
Yes.
You are, because you're young.
I am.
Us youngsters are all on TikTok. Really? You guys are on TikTok? You're on TikTok. You're on TikTok. You're on TikTok. We love TikTok. I love TikTok, despite the sort of government ownership. It's great, right? I will spend hours and hours and hours scrolling through TikTok, unashamedly. I have my dissertation due in like 3 weeks. I will spend at least 9 hours in the next few weeks scrolling on TikTok completely aimlessly. I gain absolutely no benefit from it. There is no new beneficial information on TikTok. It's just so entertaining. And the way that the algorithms work mean that as soon as you search a particular thing, or as soon as you want to look at a particular thing, you are completely encompassed by this algorithm that completely captures you. Anyone that's been on TikTok for at least a few hours, you scroll, like, it completely takes an understanding of your behavior and of your likes and dislikes, which is really funny, because I remember the first few days of downloading TikTok and I was really stressed for an exam. I think I must have liked maybe 1 or 2 videos on it. The next day I had a flood of videos all about how stressful exams are and how stressful school is, and I was like, this app is crazy. I mean, it really does target everything you want to know. Now, this is a problem with these social media communists. This middle one, actually, the one that says, capitalism is bad, part 9, standard of living. This is actually part of a Why Capitalism is Bad series, a whole series about why capitalism is bad. And these are all young people that believe these things, that argue for these things. And as we can see from the polling, this is the majority of young people across the world that are starting to believe these things. And they're being indoctrinated by TikTok and by social media. We all remember this is maybe a bit more of a touchy subject, but I'll say it here. The Black Lives Matter protests that we saw. I mean, the Black Lives Matter organization they give all their money to the Democrat Party in the US. I think that's not controversial, that's a fact. The founders have also been open about the fact that they are Marxists. And they believe that in order for us to end racism, we must first see the downfall of capitalism, because of course that will end racism. I don't think that's true. We look at these individuals, these young people that believe these things, and we see how easily they sheep together in order for them to believe these things. We saw it on Instagram with the BLM protest. This was around 2020. We saw people posting a black screen, #Blackout Tuesday, because I'm such a great social justice warrior and I care about racism so much, I'm going to spend the time to post a little black screen on my Instagram and #Blackout Tuesday. It's this virtue signaling that we see, right? But what it does show is how young people are so influenced by these things, and they are incredibly influenced by the way that we think about politics and economics. And on TikTok in particular, I think this is why I've used this as an example. Young people will look at these ideas and they'll completely flock behind it because they are explained to them in such basic ways. All the wonderful academics that we've had talk this week, talking about objectivist ethics and talking about self-development, a lot of these ideas go straight over these people's heads, right? Which is why I think that we need more young people. We need what I like to call the gateway drug, right? We sort of need this gateway drug in order for us to get people into the movement. And I think that the John Galt School is a fantastic example of how they're getting students, getting young people into this. But we need more gateway drugs online to get people into libertarianism and into the freedom movement in order for them to understand these ideas. And then we can get them to read Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead and whatever else we want them to read, Capitalism and Freedom. We get these people to read these things once they've already been enticed by these ideas. So all of you people out here that think these ideas, that believe these things as fervently as I do, and as many of the speakers here also do, it is your job to go away from here and argue these things and argue for them because you stand. And get on TikTok. Get on TikTok and argue these things. I'm on TikTok, and my old TikTok name was Capitalism is Reem, because it was a slang thing in this is such an East London thing, but it was a slang thing that Reem meant cool. So it was a slang thing to call Reem. So capitalism is Reem. But go on TikTok, go on social media and argue for these things. And I think if I talk anymore, I'm going to start to die, literally. So thank you very much for listening. I'm open to questions.
Well, thank you very much for the lecture. It was fascinating, and I got to learn so much. My question, actually, I've been thinking about this for a while now, and I want to know your opinion. Do you think that capitalism and different movements, like fight against racism or feminism or just anything other, can be compatible with so they can be compatible or they are incompatible, and to what extent?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the feminism one I think is particularly interesting. I'm actually of the view that the feminist movement was advanced, and women have been advanced by these ideas, by free market ideas, by property rights, for example. So let me just use the UK as an example of this. We had International Women's Day very recently, and a lot of women were sort of talking about women's suffrage, and when women were able to vote, When women were able to vote, this is kind of the women's suffrage, the suffrage movement, votes for women, this is kind of seen as the epitome of feminism, of women's rights. But essentially all that meant was that women could put a box in Conservative or Labour, which is choosing a government that was still going to take your money anyway, right? That, to me, is not what is the true advancement of women's rights. Now, I would say when women were able to legally own their own property, own their own bank account, earn their own money, and not be dependent on their husbands, on their male counterparts, that is true feminism. That is true freedom and advancement of women. So I think that actually what we need is a feminist movement on the right, on the sort of free market side, on the objectivist side, that allows us to argue for these morals and these ethics in opposition to this leftist feminism. Because I think that we generally, whenever you hear feminist, you think, oh my God, it's a crazy blue-haired, crazy person that's going to tell me that I'm sexist for looking at her in the eye because that's really bad. Or, and then these men are just so scared of feminists, right? But I think that what we need to do is actually take that back and have an opposition to feminism, because I think that feminism can be a fantastic movement if we argue for free markets and we argue for libertarian feminism, because that is truly what will advance women themselves.
Yes, but one more comment on this. As a result of free market, basically policy, and maybe that's neutral, but how about the coverage and discrimination against women because of this? Like, the market is free, so anyone can take any position they want to, but certain organizations, certain employees don't want to hire women because of obvious reasons. So maybe I think that's why.
What obvious reasons are there?
For example, the maternity leave.
Yeah, okay. So if you as an employer don't want to employ a woman for whatever reason that is, I believe, is completely up within the free market. That is up to them as an individual to make that decision. I won't be giving my money to them. And remember, there are, in the world, 50-50 women and men, right? You with your own money, you vote with your dollars, actually. If you see a company, and this is well known that this company is discriminating against women, people will stop giving their money to that company. And that's the beauty of the free market, right? The free market means you don't have to give your money anywhere you don't want to. And you as an individual can give your money to companies that are sustainable, that are environmentally friendly, that are explicitly anti-racist or explicitly pro-women or pro-bringing women into the workplace. Maybe they have special childcare facilities to help women into the workplace. You as an individual with your own money are completely free to give your money anywhere you wish to. That's okay.
Thank you for your speech. I have a couple of questions on statistics that you showed about the accepting and the preferable thoughts of young people on socialism in the US and in the UK. And I also have seen Angel here, there, yeah. She also has been on the talk of Mr. Sylvanus from Foundation of Economic Education, and he had completely different perspective on that. So he showed the statistics about young people in the US taking the thought about American dream. So they also think now, so like the whole talk was about Generation Z and why we did not lose this whole generation yet, at least. So the statistics said that people actually understand what American dream is, and that they want to be rich, and they understand that if they don't work at all, if they just live on the money of the state, they will not be rich. Do you think that this statistic and that one are different because of the lack of economic education and the lack of explanation what socialism is and what is the rich people?
Yeah, well, I'm not familiar with the previous stats that you said, but saying do you want the American dream versus do you want capitalism are very different definitions of what a market economy could look like, right? The American dream is this sort of built-up idea behind the market economy. It's this idea that America is the land of opportunity, and this is a it was effectively used as a propaganda technique by the US government. So if that's the way that the question was phrased, undoubtedly the majority of people would say, yeah, I want the American dream. But if it's about, I mean, I don't know if that's the exact phrasing they use, but the Fraser polling, if I go, ooh, there we go. The Fraser polling, this is the poll that came out from this year, and this was looking at all four of these countries, and this showed that the majority, when you asked them about capitalism and socialism, those two words were chosen very intentionally. Then the majority of those young people, the 18 to 34 bracket, will pick socialism. So it really depends on the way that the question is being phrased to people. I don't like the word capitalism for this reason. I think, again, it's a term that was coined by Marx, but it's not really about gaining capital. It's about freedom. It's about the free exchange of goods and services, which is why I prefer the term market economy. And I think, actually, if we want to convince these young people that the free market is moral, we should be using the word free market rather than capitalism, because capitalism, I think, still has a bad rap. Or we can reclaim it and take it back, and maybe we can do that. I don't know.
Thank you.
It's okay.
So I would love to ask your opinion about what I say. So for example, I know that in the US, some companies just spoil the scientists, the research centers, let's say, to write something wrong about a certain product, especially with the food, just to sell more and to make, let's say, fake scientific papers to say that, yeah, this product is so healthy, you can consume it just for selling more and for more money. I mean, what do you think? Like, how ethical is this? And do you think there is a solution for this?
I mean, I think you could probably expect my opinion would be that that's entirely unethical. But it's interesting, actually. We see a lot of governments across the world employ the use of scientific data or scientific evidence, and they commission this evidence in order to support the position they've already come to. We saw this in the UK with the Nudge Policy Unit. What they would do is they would essentially try and architect these choice to, well, they would make it look like it's a choice by opting in and opting out of different policies, and they would effectively come to a policy decision. So I want to do X. Scientists, find me some evidence that will support this. And this is actually why I think that the entire, during the COVID lockdown, this entire policy behind, evidence-based policy is what they called it. I mean, you can find evidence that masks work, masks don't work. You can find evidence that particular different ways of living, going out once a day or twice a day or whatever it is, going out outdoors, you can find evidence to support whatever position you take. So, and especially during that time now, we have more clarity. So I think you're absolutely right. Governments tend to commission the use of objective or sort of scientific data in order to support the policy positions that they've already come to. And that usually is to advance their own power, and also to advance the government's power and advance the government's reach into our own lives, which is very bad, which we don't want. So I think we should always question all authority and question all government-produced objective scientific data, which usually isn't the case. Any more? Are we all done? Questions? Any more questions? All good. Great. My throat can get a rest. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much for listening.